President Donald Trump has officially launched a new trade battle by slapping aggressive tariffs on Canada, Mexico, and China.
We're doing a 25% tariff on steel and aluminum.
The administration claims these tariffs will correct trade imbalances and protect American jobs, but the rest of the world sees it as economic warfare. A 25% tariff on goods from Canada and Mexico, alongside a 10% levy on Chinese imports, is already sending shockwaves through the global economy. As countries retaliate, businesses are scrambling, investors are on edge, and the question now is whether these tariffs will escalate into a full-scale global trade war, one that could send entire economies into chaos. We're breaking it all down, so make sure to like, share, and subscribe to Economy Explorer. Stay till the end to see the full impact. Will American consumers pay the price? The promise was to bring jobs back to the U.S., but the reality could be a financial nightmare for millions of American households. When the government slaps tariffs on imports, it's not just foreign companies that feel the impact. It's the businesses and workers within the U.S. economy who rely on those imports to survive. From auto manufacturers needing steel and aluminum to grocery stores stocking everyday essentials, rising costs will ripple through every sector. The average American won't just see slightly higher prices, they could face the most expensive cost of living spike in years. Take cars, for example. U.S. automakers import a significant amount of steel and aluminum to build their vehicles. With Trump's 25% tariff on these materials, manufacturers are left with two choices: absorb the cost or pass it on to consumers. Spoiler alert, companies never absorb the cost. The price of a new car could jump by thousands of dollars, making it even harder for Americans to afford big-ticket purchases. And it won't stop at cars. Electronics, appliances, and even clothing could become luxury items for households already struggling with inflation. But the worst impact may be felt at the grocery store. Many food products rely on packaging made from aluminum, while countless goods are imported from Canada and Mexico. If tariffs drive up production and transportation costs, those price hikes will land right in American shopping carts. The same carton of eggs, the same gallon of milk, the same loaf of bread, soon they'll cost significantly more. And for families living paycheck to paycheck, that's not just an inconvenience, it's an economic disaster. Even more alarming is what happens to the job market. If businesses can't absorb these higher costs, they'll need to make tough decisions. Some will raise prices, making their products less competitive. Others will look for cheaper alternatives, perhaps by outsourcing production to countries where tariffs don't apply. And then there are those that will simply cut jobs to survive. The very workers these tariffs were supposed to protect could be the first ones on the chopping block. So, will American consumers pay the price? Absolutely. They won't just see higher prices on goods. They'll feel it in their wallets, their job security, and their ability to afford the basic necessities of life. And if the trade war escalates, the burden on American households will only grow heavier. Will Canadian households suffer under Trump's tariffs? For decades, Canada and the U.S. have shared one of the strongest economic partnerships in the world. Goods flow freely across the border, industries rely on each other, and supply chains are deeply interconnected. But Trump's tariffs threaten to unravel that relationship, sending shockwaves through the Canadian economy and hitting households where it hurts the most: their wallets. At first glance, these tariffs might seem like a blow only to Canadian businesses that export goods to the U.S., but the reality is much worse. Many Canadian industries rely on American imports, particularly in manufacturing and agriculture. If those imports suddenly become more expensive due to tariffs, Canadian companies will have to pass on the costs to consumers. That means everything from household appliances to farming equipment could see dramatic price increases, making life more expensive for everyday Canadians. But the real economic pain could come from job losses. With tariffs making cross-border trade more costly, American companies might start sourcing products from other countries instead of Canada. Manufacturing hubs in Ontario and Quebec, which depend on U.S. trade, could see layoffs on a massive scale. And if businesses close or cut staff, local economies will suffer. The restaurant that serves factory workers, the daycare that relies on working parents, the retail store that depends on middle-class spending. When trade slows, it's not just exporters who feel the pain. It's everyone. And then there's the grocery store. Canada imports a significant amount of food from the U.S., particularly fresh produce and packaged goods. If tariffs drive up costs, Canadian families will be forced to pay more for essentials. A simple grocery run could start to feel like a luxury shopping spree. The cost of living, already high in major Canadian cities, will only climb higher, squeezing the middle class and pushing lower-income families into even more financial distress. The scariest part? A full-blown recession isn't out of the question. If businesses pull back on hiring, if consumers cut spending, if trade barriers choke economic growth, Canada's economy could take a serious hit. A recession would mean higher unemployment, declining wages, and an even steeper cost of living. And all of it could be triggered by one man's trade war. So, will Canadian households suffer under Trump's tariffs? Without a doubt. The economic strain will hit businesses, workers, and consumers alike. Whether it's through higher prices, lost jobs, or a broader financial downturn, Canadian families are bracing for an economic storm they didn't ask for, but may have no choice but to weather. Will Mexico's economy be pushed to the brink? For Mexico, Trump's tariffs are more than just a policy shift. They could be an economic earthquake. Mexico's manufacturing sector is deeply tied to the United States, with billions of dollars in goods flowing north of the border every year. Automobiles, electronics, machinery, these industries rely on free trade to survive. But with a 25% tariff now acting as a financial blockade, factories across Mexico are being forced to make brutal decisions. The result? Mass layoffs, stalled investments, and a wave of economic instability that threatens to unravel years of growth. Factories that once thrived on exporting goods to the U.S. are now at risk of shutting down. Orders drop, production slows, layoffs begin. Entire communities built around manufacturing are bracing for an economic downturn. As these industries crumble, the ripple effect will be devastating. Families who once had stable incomes will find themselves unable to afford basic necessities. Local businesses, restaurants, stores, services that rely on these workers will start shutting their doors. A single tariff can set off a chain reaction that disrupts an entire economy. And then there's inflation. Mexico imports significant amounts of food, fuel, and consumer goods from the U.S. If tariffs drive up costs, the price of daily essentials will skyrocket. That means higher grocery bills, more expensive gas, and a financial squeeze on the very people who can least afford it. For the working class, survival will become even harder. But the biggest danger? A full-blown economic crisis. If trade slows, if businesses fail, if consumer spending collapses, Mexico could be heading toward a recession that shakes the entire region. And if Mexico's economy falters, it won't just be a local problem. It will send shockwaves across Latin America, impacting investments, currency markets, and regional stability. So, will Mexico's economy be pushed to the brink? The answer is a resounding yes. Factories are already warning of job cuts. Prices are already rising. And if Trump's tariffs continue, Mexico could be staring down one of its worst economic crises in recent history. Could this trigger an economic collapse? This isn't just about Mexico. This isn't just about North America. Trump's tariffs are sending tremors through the global economy, and the aftershocks could be catastrophic. In an interconnected world, economic warfare doesn't stop at borders. It spreads like wildfire. As Canada, Mexico, and China retaliate with their own tariffs, the situation is spiraling into something far more dangerous than a trade dispute. Global markets are already reacting with volatility. Investors are pulling back. Businesses are delaying expansions. The cost of doing business is rising worldwide, and the longer this conflict drags on, the more serious the damage will be. Supply chains, the backbone of global commerce, are being torn apart. Major corporations rely on a delicate balance of international suppliers to keep prices low and production efficient. Now, with trade barriers in place, that balance is collapsing. Goods are taking longer to move, costs are rising, manufacturing is slowing, and when businesses can no longer absorb the costs, the burden shifts to consumers, leading to higher prices and reduced spending power. But the stock market is where the real panic could set in. When trade slows, profits shrink. When profits shrink, investors pull out. A prolonged trade war could send financial markets into freefall, wiping out billions in wealth overnight. Companies that once thrived on international trade will struggle to survive, leading to mass layoffs and corporate bankruptcies. And then there's currency instability. When economies are thrown into turmoil, currencies fluctuate wildly. Investors lose confidence. Central banks scramble to adjust policies, and exchange rates swing unpredictably. If global currencies lose stability, international trade becomes even more chaotic, making it harder for businesses to plan ahead and for economies to recover. Could this trigger an economic collapse? If tensions continue escalating, the answer isn't just yes, it's inevitable. This trade war isn't just a battle over tariffs, it's a ticking time bomb that could detonate into a global financial crisis. The warning signs are already here. The only question left is how much worse will it get before world leaders step back from the brink? Will Trump's trade policy backfire? Trump's supporters argue that these tariffs will strengthen American manufacturing, but history suggests otherwise. Trade wars don't create economic prosperity. They destroy it. If businesses are forced to cut costs due to higher tariffs, the first thing they'll do is lay off workers. If other countries retaliate with their own tariffs, American exports will take a hit. The result? A vicious cycle of economic contraction, higher prices, and fewer jobs. Instead of boosting the economy, Trump's aggressive trade stance could end up crippling it. What happens next? Right now, the world is at a tipping point. If Trump continues pushing tariffs on global trade partners, the backlash could be severe. More retaliatory tariffs, more economic uncertainty, and more pain for businesses and consumers alike. The worst-case scenario? A full-scale trade war that drags economies into recession, disrupts supply chains, and sends financial markets into a downward spiral. The best-case scenario? A last-minute negotiation that prevents further damage. But even then, the scars left by this economic standoff won't heal overnight. With each passing day, industries brace for impact, households feel the strain, and investors remain on edge. No matter which path this takes, one thing is certain. The fallout from Trump's tariffs is just beginning, and its consequences will shape the global economy for years to come. Will the world's leaders find common ground before it's too late, or are we headed toward an economic crisis that no one is prepared for? If you found this analysis insightful, make sure to like, share, and subscribe to Economy Explorer for more in-depth breakdowns of the biggest financial events shaping our world. Watch one of the suggested videos on your screen to stay ahead of the latest economic trends. And, as always, thanks for being a part of our channel. We appreciate your support, and we'll see you in the next one.